Hello everyone and welcome to today's session, How to Leverage Security Stack Data to Strengthen Your Cybersecurity Posture. I am Shilpa Goswami and I'll be your host for the day. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few house rules for our attendees. The session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to organizers or panelists, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connections or you may log out and log in again. An important announcement for certificate of attendance. Participants need to attend the complete webinar to qualify for the certificate of attendance. Also, participants should fill in the survey form, which will be sent in the attendees thank you email and answer correctly the 3 multiple choice questions based on the webinar. The certificate of attendance shall be sent to you within the next 5 to 7 working days after the event. Now about our speaker, Mike Admin. He is the co-founder and CTO of C-Matrix Inc. He has over 20 years of executive cybersecurity and project management experience in leading global enterprises. His previous positions include the CISO of Bright Machines, the CTO of Variant Systems, and the principal cybersecurity architect in Cisco Systems COE. Mike also has served in an executive role at Elbit Systems subsidiary leading SAR delivery. Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to our speaker. Mike?
Yeah, sure. So, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Depends on the time zone you are at. So, I'm Mike, and I will take you through those slides through this webinar, and I will try to make it as simple as possible, just to provide you some more knowledge and some ability about how do you are making your security stack more efficient and are able to get the information from all the relevant security layers, and how to do it like without adding additional programs, additional softwares, additional controls, but how to leverage what you already have in your stack in order to get better. So like recently, last years, the security information field is becoming very wide, and the number of the security tools that the security organizations in the companies are using is huge. So it's much more than tools in, if you compare it with other organizations within the companies, like it would be like finance or IT or any other. So the security leaders are having a relatively small amount of employees that they need to manage a huge security stack, which is just growing endlessly, and the attack surface is expanding daily, and a lot of new companies are coming in to provide the protection. So it's like an endless growth cycle. So having said that, the more tools that we are using in our security stack, so the more data those tools are generating. And there is a huge opportunity to learn about a stack by just accessing the relevant data that your security tools are providing. And just to say just a small example, like a medium enterprise in North America today utilize like several dozens of tools. On the bigger companies, it can get up to hundreds of tools. And on a very huge enterprises, it can be up to, 1,000 security tools only on the defensive area, which is an enormous quantity of the tools. And they are all generating data based on what they are configured to generate and more. So basically, it's not just the logs that the regular security engineers are getting out of those machines, but there is much more information, like the audit information, like the configurations and policy items information. And being able to compile this all together So security leadership can be much more deeply in the understanding of what do they have, of how they perform, and what is the security posture. So whatever was built in the beginning when the information security world was just establishing, it was a compliance, and it's still on the top of many organizations, like almost all the organizations. Everybody needs to comply to some standard, to some certification. So for some, it would be just a good way to start the security organization, the program, and the protection of the organization. And for others, it's just a business requirement. So, I mean, if you're not certified to this or that framework, so some of the customers will not be willing to work with those companies. And some companies that are working in specific areas, they are obliged to be compliant with something by the regulations of those countries or those verticals that are acting in. And compliance is a great beginning to build your security program, but it's not enough. Because basically the compliance is check a box. It does encourage the preparation. It does encourage the security people to start understanding what they have in their organization, I mean security organization. What are the threats? What is the landscape? What are the assets that they need to protect? And it provides a great baseline for the security. But the compliance itself does not provide the ability to measure the performance. It does not let the security leaders and their organization to get a reflection of the real-time data or real-time what's going on there besides the events. And as I said before, the more system we have, the more events we are dealing with, and it's so big forest that we just cannot see the trees in this forest. And of course, the compliance does not recommend any action. So it say you need to do this and this, but they are not stating on the how to do it and what's the correct way to do it. And another problem with that is the compliance is done manually and it's done in a specific period of time. So it can be quarterly, annually, or so. So the information that will be provided on this assessment or this data gathering will be correct only for this particular minutes in time. So after the compliance report is being submitted, it doesn't mean that things are not changing. So the threats are evolving and the controls are being changed, and the trends are just enormous. And this is something that can be really, really missed if you are building only on the compliance. So security leaders are asked a lot of questions on a daily basis by different parts of the organization. It can come from the management, it can come from the peers, from the employees, it can come from external parties as well, from the regulators or the customers. And just to give some examples, the question can be like very, very simple, but the answer for them is not that simple. Like, for example, have our tools been adapted to ensure protection? So if I purchase some security tool or a license, it doesn't mean that I'm protected. So I need to ensure that it's deployed, it's covered, it's utilized, it's configured, and then I need to understand if it's being effectively used and effectively working. So, in other words, does the tool provide what it's supposed to provide? And by just working with the data that is provided by the consoles without getting a bit deeper in the information that those tools are providing, it's a big challenge to understand the efficiency of the usage, the efficiency of the tools themselves, and efficiency of your utilization, and efficiency of your team working with the tool. So this is the reality of the Chief Information Security Officer as a person, as an office. And of course, having a lot of tools in the stack, it can really be a great solution to automate the data collection. But you need to know what you automate, how you automate, who are the people that are digesting this information, and what is the outcome that you are expecting. As a leader of the organization, you are not expecting to get operational data. You are expecting to get some information or some insights that will help the business. And this is another huge challenge of information security guys. They are engineers. They are much less a business leaders. They are less connected to the business than to the technology. And this is another gap. It's another gap of translation of the technical language to the business. So it will make sense to the business. So as we said, we have a lot of tools which are providing a tons of data, and we are having a great opportunity to lead more efficiently if we are taking all those items under consideration. So let's assume that we have some automation to collect this data, and we are starting to collect a lot of data in some central place, and we are getting a lot of measurements. So we can measure the number of users that we have, the number of logins that we have, the number of attacks that we were experiencing, and much more other things in our data lake. But the measurements by themselves, they do not tell a story, right? So to tell a real story of what is going on there and to answer the question, so first you need to have a context. The context, it should be something that will be aggregating those measurements into something that will tell a story and make more sense. Like, for example, we can take a huge pain point of all the organization, which is ransomware. So in order to make sure that you are as much prepared to the ransomware attack as you can, so you need to find all the places in your data points that will act as an indicators that will say, okay, there is something going wrong there. It's not necessarily saying that you're 100% going to be hit by ransomware and not going to be able to provide a protection. So you need to scope all of those metrics and measurements under the same umbrella or the context. And for now, the context for this example would be a ransomware. So once you have collected all this information and put it in the context, so the information will come from different types of the security defensive products. So some can come from the network, some from the identity management, some from the endpoint protection, some from backup, some from data, etc., etc. So we need to clearly define under the context, how do we correlate this data from the multiple sources? I'm not going to tell you how to do it because it's hundreds of hours of explanations, but it's important to make sure that the audience understand that there are multiple sources that speak a little bit different languages and different data models, but there is a need to correlate them in order to create a context for this particular thing that we are discussing now as a ransomware. And once you have it, so basically you have your multi-dimensional perspective, and you can see, okay, in order to protect my organization better against ransomware, so there are several safeguards that I need to have in place. And the safeguards can be, okay, I need to know what are my assets, what are my critical assets. I need to know what are my permissions of my users. I need to know what's going on the network. I need to have the mapping for my data. And I need to make sure that I have all the technologies and preparedness to the same moment that my organization may and will be breached. As we all know that security breach, it's not a question of when. Sorry, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So we need to assume that every organization will eventually get a ransomware attack. And this is now the game of survival, right? We don't want to win the game. We want just to stay in the game as much as we can. So we need to be very agile and very efficient in all the data points and all the defense mechanisms that we are managing. So the big security stacks that are covering the big organizations, they have a lot of types of the data points available. So as I previously mentioned, the more different types of data points we are collecting the data from, the more dimensions of the picture we're getting. So we can do better, we can be more agile, more efficient, we can save more time by doing the right correlations. And the most important, this knowledge provides us an ability to make better decisions, to save more effort, more money, and be just a better security and business leaders, not only the security, but the business leaders. So it was a theory and before. So now let's try to put some examples in the practice. And I want to go into 3 types of different dimensions. So the first one would be about the efficiency in the budget. The second one would be the efficiency in setting the priorities, like where do we go and what problems do we solve in higher priority, and what can like be kept for later. And the manpower allocation is another very important part of the security organizations management, and we're going to touch upon it as well. So let's start with the budget efficiency. And it's a question, like many questions that the security leaders are being asked. So, okay, how do we manage the budget in an efficient manner? So, and let's give a small example of a budget spend. So we are an organization of, let's say, 10,000 employees. So we have 10,000 computers, and organically we are purchasing 10,000 of licenses, let's say, for example, for the endpoint protection, for antivirus. So, okay, the check has been paid and we have 10,000 licenses. What's now? Are we protected? Not yet. So we need to make sure that we are doing a good utilization. So first, we need to ensure that the protection that we bought, that we have purchased is the right protection for our organization. We need to ensure that it's doing exactly what it needs to do. And it's really recommended to do this check before the actual purchase. But it happened, and we have 10,000 licenses. So now we need to ensure that all our computers and servers and anything related to be protected are covered by those agents, those tools. So in order to get this coverage information, it's not enough just to pull the reports from the management consoles generally. And bigger companies, they are having usually more than one type of endpoint protection software. So it becomes a nightmare. So the security leaders need to go often to different parts of the organization that are doing the deployment, for example, and just to pull the information from them, just asking, okay, what is the state of the deployment? What is the state of the policies configuration? Let's review that. Are the policies configured as they are expected to be configured? And the worst, it's, are we running on defaults? Did we change anything to make the default configuration better? And important to put a side note here that the security leadership is generally just setting the policies. They are often not given an access to the actual tools. So they are some sort of blind. So they know what they need to do. They know how they need to do. But other divisions in the organizations are doing the implementation. So in order to understand what is the state, so they just need to go back and forth to the operational guys from IT or from help desk or from any other organizations, and to understand what is the state. So this is about the utilization. Later on, a lot of big organizations, like historically, may have more than one solution that is doing the same control or the same capability. It happens a lot when some big company starting to buy other companies, and they are getting their technologies along with the company themselves, and they need to deal with it now. So instead of having one antivirus solution that is, deployed, up, running, and hopefully configured as it's expected to be configured, now they have 2 antiviruses, or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. Some other organizations may deliberately split their premises to use different protection programs based on the environment. So like, for example, on the corporate computers, they may deploy software X, and on the R&D, on the development, they can say, okay, this particular antivirus is like too protective, like it's too hardened, so our programmers cannot really work with that. So what they do, they just trying to disable the agent. So we are not getting to the point that we want to be protected. So in those cases, many organizations are taking different solutions for those regions, for those areas of the organization, to do a better fit and to still keep protected. It can be like I say, corporate R&D, it can be IT, it can be IoT organizations, it can be OT organizations, and just the managing of all of this is a nightmare. And another thing that is really good to have available as an information when the information security leader is having his meetings with the finance departments is, how do I really use the licenses? So I have purchased 10,000 licenses, you remember, but actually the organization on this year has only 7,000 employees and 7,000 computers, which means that we are utilizing or actually using only 70% of our licenses purchased. And if we'll do some math and multiply the quantity of the unused licenses by the license cost every month, and we'll do it annually. So in medium-sized organizations, it can come to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, and on the bigger organization, it can be like several millions of dollars only for a spend. So having the data available from the tools that will actually show you what is utilized, how many computers are there, how many computers are really working and reporting, digesting this data can save an organization a lot of money. So instead of asking for more budget from the finance, so the security leaders can utilize the unused budget parts for other projects or activities. So the next example would be about setting the priorities. And it's a little bit operational example, but I think it's still important. So the question of the security leaders that are asking themselves frequently, like daily basis, is like, what do I need to focus now? And there is an example of what is critical and what is not to do now. So the flow says, okay, do you have the most updated EDR or XDR or any other malicious code prevention or protection mechanism in place? So I'm getting a list of a couple of hundreds or couple of thousands computers that I need to protect. And some of them need to be patched like immediately. So let's assume we have our vulnerability management program, and we have discovered that they are a lot of high CVSS score vulnerabilities, like critical vulnerabilities, and they are all across my servers. Well, it doesn't sound like something that we can prioritize. It's like everybody is critical and everybody has the same vulnerability. But if we go a little notch deeper, and we will see what are the controls or the capabilities that we have running on those servers, so we can assume and do additional crystallization of our priorities. So, okay, if we have the servers that are having the critical vulnerabilities and have no EDR or any other endpoint protection, so we need to deal with them now. But if those servers do have some protection with the same vulnerabilities discovered, so they are going to like P2, the priority 2. So it's not that hysterical to patch them. And we can come up with a lot of other examples just to understand, okay, I have this information coming from my stack. I have this protection that I can understand or extrapolate from this data. So it's giving a huge opportunity to prioritize the work much better. And if you remember in the beginning of the webinar, I just say that security organizations, they're really low on resources, and they have very, very huge amounts of controls or tools that they are dealing with. So efficiency equals survival. the last example from the theory to practice would be about the allocation of the manpower. And we have an example here, so I will just explain what we're talking about, and then we will go to the flow. So the question here is, are my teams allocated in the best way? So I have my operational team that needs to deal with events. So let's assume we are on the malware events. It would be a simple example. And let's say we have 5 people that are dealing with operational security on daily basis. So all the organizations, or most of the organizations, they are defining some objectives based on the readiness of the organization to take a risk, which would be the risk tolerance. So let's assume this particular virtual organization that doesn't really exist defined itself 2 hours of the objective that a critical event should be resolved within. So that means that this organization is ready to take a risk to have the critical event unresolved for 2 hours, no more. It may be less, but it cannot be more. So as a data that we can pull out of our stack, we are starting to calculate the mean time to resolve. So we want to understand what is the mean in hours to resolve the events of this criticality. And of course, we want to improve. So we'll be taking the information like from previous week, previous month, previous quarter, and we would like to see 2 things. The first thing we'd like to see is that we are improving. And the second line, which is not less important, we want to see if we are still within our tolerance range, if we are not overcoming the 2 hours of the acceptance that we need. And there can be different types of organizations with different approaches, but with the same 2 hours SLO. And let's assume we are getting to 20 minutes resolution time for the critical events, which can sound awesome, but it's not really good for the security organization. So maybe we're putting too many headcounts working on these particular threats because the organization has defined 2 hours of tolerance. So instead of getting it done in 20 minutes, it's okay to get it done in 2 hours, which means that the same resources can do other things in more efficient manner. From the other hand, there may be another example that the same group of people with the same objective definition of the 2 hours, the mean time to resolve is 20 hours, which is 10 times more that the organization is willing to take a risk on. So it may mean that there are too few resources. It may say that the resources are overloaded with other tasks. It may just simply say that those resources or those people that are working in the operational security organization are not trained enough. So we have a lot of action items that we can get out of the information digested. Now, a lot of work of the security organization leaders is outside of the security organization, because the security organization leaders are working with all the different organizations within the same company. So they have a lot of daily and weekly and monthly meetings with other functions within the organization. And to make those meetings effective, so the security leaders need to have the information available to discuss on. So it can be an executive management meetings about how are we protected, or what budget do we need with the finance, or what our marketing campaigns are bringing us in terms of additional phishing campaigns that are going like back to us. So once we have this information, we can explain another BU leaders or BU owners what the security organization is doing. It's much easier to get the cooperation of those organizations or BUs, and it's putting the chief information security officer as a really chief function in the organization aligned with the business. So just to sum it up, if you just remember nothing, so the data is there. There is a lot of information provided by your stack. Make sure that you are efficiently utilizing what you already have. If you are a security guy or girl, so don't stay as an engineer. Become a business owner. Lead with a business perspective. Be efficient about your budget, because your budget is something that's very important and measured on all the organizations. And if you're managing your data in the correct way, so you are able to see the forest and not only the trees. That would be it. So I will hand it over to Shilpa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, for such an insightful and informative session. That was a very interesting webinar, and we hope it was worth your time too. Now, before we begin with the Q&A, I would like to inform all the attendees that this session is in sync with EC Council certification ECIH, EC Council Certified Incident Handler, matched to the Incident Handler or Incident Manager role. Anyone with an ECIH certification is eligible for 17,000 plus jobs on LinkedIn globally with an average salary of $73,676. If you're interested to learn more about our program, kindly take part in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you. Mike, shall we start with the Q&A?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So our first question is by Nisa Khan, how to manage cybersecurity posture. Yeah, how to manage cybersecurity posture on cloud.
How to manage cybersecurity posture on cloud.
Yeah.
So in order to manage something, you need to measure it, right? So in order to measure something in an effective manner, so you need to start from discovering your assets. So knowing your assets, knowing the map of the field that your organization is dealing with is very fundamental. So once you have the understanding of all your workloads in the cloud, you can start doing some deployment of tools, and there are a lot of cloud security performance CSPM tools. Without going into the names, but you can easily Google it. That will help you providing this assessment. So first, they will help you understanding what are your workloads. Then they will understand to help you what are your vulnerabilities within the workloads, and then some of them will help you organizing and prioritizing your things and your work. But the best foundation for that is start knowing and understanding your assets.
Thank you, Mike, for answering that question. Our next question is by Raj. When we got critical cyber attack and our service is also critical, then in that case, we should make our service down or should we evaluate the attacks on real time?
So there is no easy answer to that. So I was consulting multiple organizations about the incident response, and it's a little bit different, a little bit different approach and team here. But first, you need to have your organization building an incident response plan. So this plan should be really coordinated with the BU holders. It should be like understanding and evaluating of the risk. What does it mean? So if the system it goes offline and the system is generating money, and every minute that system is down, you're losing the money. It's one thing. But if you have a breach of your organization and you suspect the data can leak out and cause you a bigger problem that only the service down or denials of service, so it's totally different thing. And I really recommend to take this in context with the legal team of the organizations and with the BU holders of the organization and come up with a really good incident response plan. And I really recommend to contact some company that are doing the incident response and the forensic, and to have them already engaged so they can have your company assessed, and whenever something is happening, so you can just pick up a phone and they will be just on premises and will help you coordinating the technical stuff, while the company management and the BU holders will be doing the business stuff.
Thank you so much, Mike, for answering that question. Our next question is by Mulalan. How to handle uh, if there is a sensitive data in the organization?
Can you say it again, please?
Yeah. How to handle sensitive data in the organization?
How to handle sensitive data. Okay. So the best approach to handle sensitive data is, first you need to know how to define the sensitive data. So you need to classify the data. There are a lot of solutions that can help in classification. Some of them will be automated, some of them will be manual. So first thing, like with the assets, so data is an asset, right? So you need to know your assets, know your data, know the classification, know the locations of the data, and of course utilize the relevant controls with really implementing that need to know basis. So the permissions to access the data will be limited only to the employees that really needs it. There is an interesting statistical example from one of the companies I was working with that are dealing with the data classification and data security and data mapping. They came to a conclusion that in medium-sized enterprise company, a simple employee, when he's onboarding the organization, he has access to over 8 million files that he doesn't really need to have an access to. So there is a lot to think about.
Thank you, Mike, for answering that question. Our next question is by Beldi. What are the best security tools to use in a medium-sized organization?
It's a tricky question. I mean, if the organization is like a technological organization, does the organization have a product developed? Do they have some online services that they need to protect? Do they hold some data of third parties that they need to protect? So the company needs to understand what is the field of the things they need to protect. And as a starter, I would really recommend going to the big players like Google or Microsoft or so, because they do provide a big umbrellas of services, and they are very easy to use. And there are a lot of people that can provide the support for this organization, because generally small organizations do not have their own IT or security personnel, so they are consuming external services. And the more simple is the solution, the more known is the solution, the bigger company is providing it. So the easier and cheaper will be the way to gain the support for those tools. And again, from my experience, if you are using the big names and you're utilizing and configuring them in the proper way, so you will get your protection. And I will be happy to take it offline with whoever asked that, to go into some more specific solutions based on the requirements of the company.
Thank you so much, Mike. Our next question is by Isaac. If your organization has a limited budget for cybersecurity, what strategy can you use to convince the management to support your cybersecurity budgets?
It all goes with the risk assessment. So I mean, once you know what are the risks that the organization is exposed, and the risks may be like different types of risk. It can be cyber risk, or it can be regulation risk, Like, I mean, if you don't have those specific set of controls, so you will not be able to act in the market. So that's more or less very generic answer, I know, but there is no perfect answer for this question.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. I'll take last two questions for the day. Our next question is by Emmanuel. What are the pitfalls of not leveraging security stack data?
What is the pitfalls of not leveraging security stack data?
Yes.
Basically, it's more or less all that I said on the webinar, but in the opposite. So if you are not leveraging this data, so you don't really know how your stack is performing, how the stack is consumed, how efficient is your stack, are your tools or controls providing whatever they need to provide. And it can come really close with the previous question of the budget, like how to expand the budget. Everything is starting from the understanding of the threats. So once you know your threats, you can both understand, okay, what are the contexts that we need to focus on, and the example of the ransomware is a perfect example to answer both questions. So it's like an umbrella of the solutions or of the controls that you need to have. And if you come to your leadership of the organization, and if you say, okay, we do have those controls that they are weak, after you managed the measurements of those controls or the metrics of the controls, so it will be much easier to get a budget for them. And but in order to have all those good statements to discuss with the executive of the company, you just have to have this detailed information digested in a very good manner, to have it promptly. And this is the best way to be precise, because often the security leaders are approaching the budget requests without having any good information which is backed up by numbers from what is really happening in the organization. So they say, okay, I have a gut feeling that we need to increase the security protection on this or on that application or whatever organization or part in the company. But if they come with the precise and detailed information of, okay, this is what we did, this is our assessment, this is what we made, and now we are sure that all the capabilities of products that we have purchased, they are utilized and used on the maximum, but it's still not enough. So this is the way to communicate. So we made everything that we could to be effective. This is the answer to both questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. Our last question is, how has the latest security discovery helped to curb cybercrimes?
Can I say it again?
Yeah. It's
Yeah, can you please repeat the question?
yeah. It's how has the latest security discovery helped to curb cybercrimes?
Okay, cyber crimes, as we know them today, they're really sophisticated. So there are like a lot of organizations that this is what they're doing, right? They're providing the infrastructure for the threat actors. So as today, the threat actors, they do not really need to develop the tools for themselves, or to write a malwares or to create some techniques. This is something that is being provided by organizations. And although those organizations that are supporting the criminal activities of others, or doing them by themselves, they are well-established organizations. Like, I mean, up to the level they have their own HR departments that are recruiting hackers to work for them, and the money that they can pay or the resources that they possess are quite often much bigger than the organizations that need to be protected. So generally, to try to avoiding the cybercrime is to be minded to what is the business doing, what are the risks that are able to take down the business. So I mean, if it's the business that is holding some personal information of the customers, so this is the assets that we need to protect. So this is something that we need to put our layers of the security. And if it's an online business that it can be killed by just taking down the services, so we need to invest in protection of our web services, etc. So it very depends on the organization, and without understanding the business of the organization, so the security or any other technological engineers will not be able to provide a good matching protection for those. So know your organization, know your business. This will enable you to act in a correct way and to assign or to leverage proper resources to protect the critical assets or the critical points in the organization. And by the way, the assets can be employees of the organization. They can be assets that need to be protected. So there are a lot of threat actors that are doing some sort of social engineering, like spam emails, phishing emails, etc. So they may to try to get to a specific person, or they may to try to get to the information through the specific person. So it's all about the correct mapping of your organization. So be sure that you have mapped the organization and the valuable assets before the threat actors are doing that.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker for answering those questions and for the great presentation and the knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Now, before we conclude the webinar, Mike, would you like to give a small message to our audiences?
Yeah, the small message for the audience again. As Shilp has started a webinar, so today I'm a CTO and co-founder of a startup. I'm not going to get into the names, but this is the problem that our startup is trying to solve. And there is a category now in Gartner that is called Security Performance Management. So the Gartner and the organizations and the world is starting to understand that in order to be efficient, you need to measure your performance. To measure your performance, you need to get your data. In order to get your data, you may use automation. So the more data you have, the more challenging would be to handle it manually. So finding the correct tools and finding the correct processes of measurement of your efficiency is the way. Because as I said before, and it's not my sentence, but it's a well-known one, you cannot manage something that you do not measure.
Thank you, Mike, for your message to our audiences. Now, before we end this session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, PCI 4.0 for pen testers, which is scheduled on September 16. This session is an expert presentation by Joseph Sirney. To register for this session, please do go and visit our website www.ecc.edu cybertalk. The link is given in the chat section. Hope to see you all on September 16. With this, we end the session. You may now disconnect your line. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye.